Welcome to Beyond Four Walls. I'm David Dworkin, President and CEO of the National Housing Conference, the nation's oldest and broadest housing coalition. Here we'll dig deep into the pressing topics of housing in America. And while we do that, we'll also get to know some of the people who've devoted their lives to seeking tangible, actionable, and achievable solutions. So thanks for joining us.
My name's Caitlin Harris-Walker. I'm the Associate Director of Affordable Housing Initiatives at the Mortgage Bankers Association. We're here to talk about molding the homeownership message to Millennials and Gen Zs. Uncertainty has been a reoccurring theme of the last couple years, and Millennials and Gen Z who are looking to be potential homebuyers are no different. They're continuing to experience some of these issues, and it makes them question a lot of their purchases and decision making. So we're going to talk a little bit today about how we can change that narrative and get them more involved, get them more interested in housing, and connect them with the folks who can really provide the education, resource, and investment to help create their wealth and generational wealth to come.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jung Choi. I'm a Senior Research Associate at the Urban Institute. I'm very excited to be here. I joined Urban 5 years ago, and Millennial Homeownership is the first project that I led. And I'm proud to say it's one of the most cited research that I ever did in my life. And it sort of reflects how much people are interested in this population and really want to know and understand about how they're behaving in the housing market. So I'm excited to present some of those findings today.
We have Dr. Ruth Jones-Nichols.
I am the Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary for Public Engagement in the Office of Public Affairs at HUD. Obviously, one thing that is very important to us, and Secretary Fudge talks about this often, is the goal to bring people home. And so today I'll be talking about some of our efforts, particularly those targeting young adults who are interested in home ownership.
Niles Lichtenstein, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Nestment. We help empower Millennial and Gen Z buyers to pool their capital as family and friends to own property together. We know people's wages haven't gone up by 2x in 4 years, so how can we change the demand side of that equation, not just wait on supply to be built? So we'll talk a little bit about how millennials have pushed through and the messaging around that and tried to find innovative solutions and hacks, as they call it.
My name is Megan Lynch. I'm the Public Policy Manager for Federal Affairs at Airbnb. Airbnb was founded in 2007 by two roommates in San Francisco during the recession who were trying to find a way to cover rent. And so they decided to welcome 3 guests into their apartment. You know, the average host that's listing on Airbnb is earning about $14,000 a year. And so that, as we all know, that's about 2 months worth of extra income for a median household. So it can really be impactful when we talk about how can homeownership be sustainable and how can people use their spaces creatively in the future of the way that we live.
Jung mentioned her research and how excited she is to be working on it, and I'm excited to hear more about it. So she's going to set the stage with some data on millennials and homeownership and some of the key areas of barriers to addressing homeownership for these younger generations.
I'm mostly going to focus on millennial homeownership, but then we all know that Gen Z is also entering into the prime home buying age, so they're mostly in their early 20s and mid-20s, but most of the data here today will focus on millennials and how they differ from the prior generation. Millennials, when it comes to homeownership rate, the numbers are significantly lower than the prior generation. And we see that especially in 2015, the younger adults homeownership rate was only 37%. And compared to prior generation in the same age group, that number is about 15 to 10 percentage point lower. So it's currently around about 42%, but then compared to the prior generation is still substantially lower. So what is not showing in this homeownership picture is household formation. So there has been slight declines from 2015 to 2020, but we still see that a substantial number of younger adults currently are now delaying their own household formation and living with somebody else under their roofs. So what we've done previously was look at those who lived with their parents between age 25 and 34 and looked at their home ownership and their headship rate, which is the household formation rate 10 years after, and compared to those who were either renter or a homeowner of their own in the same age. After 10 years, after living with the parents, those who lived with the parents are still significantly less likely to be household head compared to those who moved out of their parents' households and either rented or owned a home between ages 25 to 34. And we also see that we first thought maybe like they would eventually catch up, because if you're living with your parents during that period, you're actually saving rent 10 years later, but we're not really seeing that in the data. 10 years later, they're not only less likely to be household heads, but then they're also less likely to be owning a home compared to those who rented or owned a home 10 years before. So why is millennial homeownership so low? The study by the Fed actually found that it's not the preference, it's actually the lack of financial resources that are real barriers of millennial entering into homeownership. Millennials are more racially and ethnically diverse, and sadly in this country, people of color still have significantly lower homeownership rate than white households, and also millennials are more likely to delay marriage and having a child, so this also affects their lower homeownership rate. And we actually find that the homeownership rate for all race and ethnic groups dropped between 2000 and 2021, and we saw actually the greatest drop among the young adults of color. We know that a lot of young adults actually get financial support from their parents when they first access homeownership, but many of them couldn't really get those financial support because also their parents also kind of was affected by the Great Recession and really couldn't afford to support their children accessing homeownership via down payment support. And there has been a lot of talk about the role of student loan debt. It was around $4,000 in 2021 on average, but it soared up to more than 3 times in 2016. So it does impact young adults' DTI ratio, which also is a barrier of accessing homeownership. So for young home buyers, it was really difficult to find an affordable home that they could purchase. And the credit also tightened following the Great Recession. So with a similar level of credit scores, it was more difficult to access the mortgage because of the tightening of the credit market. Our research finds that the age of buying the first home really matters in terms of future housing wealth. And also the age of buying that home really has a big impact on how much wealth you are able to accumulate at the age near retirement. Those who bought their homes between 25 to 34 have the greatest housing wealth at the age near retirement. And the second is those who bought their homes before age 25. But then those who bought their homes after age 34, their housing wealth is substantially lower than the early home buyers. So this indicates that because many millennials are having trouble to access homeownership earlier in their life, this is going to have a long-term implication on their future lives, especially at the age after retirement when the financial stability gets worsened.
Ruth, I know HUD's been actively engaged in figuring out how to change the message for this younger group, and you have been doing a lot of new implementing new innovative ways to reach them. Can you share a little bit about the house party and why it was really able to connect with some of these younger generations?
Let me just start by saying when I was invited to present as part of this panel, I questioned if it was the right invitation because I am not a communications professional. I am actually a social worker by training. I have an MSW in social work. I have a PhD in social work. I'm not a clinical social worker. I'm a macro social worker, but I am not a communicator. And so when I think about this house party and how it came about, I want to just share that I'm a social worker. So take my comments in context. The secretary said to our team, we have done a phenomenal job of reaching a variety of stakeholders and sharing key messages about what we're doing to make home ownership possible. But we haven't quite gotten to young adults. And she asked, what can we do to better get the message to young adults so that they will feel encouraged about the possibility of home ownership if that is something they choose? We have to tell them what we are doing to address lower credit scores so that they know if they're paying their rent on time. We have to tell them the work we are doing around student loan debt so that individuals understand. We have to tell them what we are doing to expand down payment assistance, and we can't simply do that through a Washington Post story. So she said, how are we going to do that? Well, we have to start by recognizing that most folks are probably not going to want to show up for a listening session. They're probably not going to want to show up for a town hall or a focus group. But I wonder if they would show up for a party. So that's how we landed on this virtual house party hosted by the one and only Secretary Marcia L. Fudge. Now, when we structured this house party, we had several key goals in mind, goals to increase awareness about the benefits of home ownership, goals to make sure individuals understood the resources that were available and the work HUD had already done to make home ownership more of a possibility for individuals across our country, including people of color and African Americans in particular. We said, we have to make sure we have the right messengers. So we brought in Millennials to tell their story about how they had gone through the journey toward home ownership. We also had someone who called herself the mortgage lady, and she did a session on myth busting. So this virtual house party, believe it or not, actually had over 6,000 individuals who registered to attend, about 4,000 who actually participated. We hosted it on our social media channels, and that was a tremendous learning experience. Since we had the virtual house party, individuals have come to us to not only express their appreciation for how we targeted young adults and how we shared the message, but they've also asked if they could partner with HUD to further implement house parties across the nation. So if you hear about a house party happening on a local college campus, know that it probably happened first at HUD.
We know that there's a lot of benefits towards homeownership, which we've already covered, but there's some folks who either can't become a home buyer because of things like affordability, availability, resources, education, but some folks just want to be a renter. Niles, could you talk about some of the barriers that I just mentioned of why they are staying as a renter? And Megan, could you perhaps talk about some of the benefits of just renting and why folks are enjoying renting, particularly those younger, in this very virtual employee lifestyle who want flexibility, particularly the younger generations?
And so in my personal life, I had been raised by a single immigrant mother, and we rented out the rooms of our house. We were fortunate to have a house that my dad left behind to college graduate students at UC Berkeley, and that's what paid the mortgage. And looking back, my brother and I talk about how that was such an important stability, and it helped her because she had no job and no community support. So when I had made a little bit of money, I wanted to help out my friends and family who didn't have generational wealth through housing. So we started with a multifamily in Oakland, made it a TIC, then turned it into an LLC. And then after 10 years, they were able to refinance and get checks that went towards their primary. During the pandemic, I just couldn't get around, like every bar, every dinner party was, hey, how can we own together, right? I threw a landing page up for something called Nestment, and all of a sudden we had thousands of signups. And so we spent all of last year just doing a lot of research and talking to people and getting kind of the qualitative end to what Urban presented on the quantitative end, which was people really wanted to be homeowners, but they also saw new ways of actually doing that. Like home ownership could mean something different. So there was two sets of groups. One was what we call shift buyers. So those are folks who can't necessarily afford an urban metro, but they are able to purchase maybe a home in a place where they can also offset their expenses through short-term rentals on Airbnb or other platforms. And then the other model is multifamily homes as well, where we have folks who live in one or two of the units. They'll go in together. Multifamilies tend to be 10 to 15% less per square foot, especially in urban metros and things like that. So they'll go in together and maybe rent out one or two of the units and live in one or two of the units. And again, that gives them a base. Airbnb is a prevalent way people travel and stay in places. I think this is going to be the way people in their 20s and 30s are going to purchase, and they're going to see it almost like a retirement plan.
We don't want to discount how Millennials and Gen Z folks might be feeling about homeownership. And I know that, it's the common message to push folks into homeownership because we all know that that's one of the best ways to generate wealth. But understanding the benefits of why they may be renting, and maybe the homeownership could play into that, or maybe that, they're not thinking about it. I think one of the primary things is, homeownership, making homeownership something that's attainable. Because I think that that's one of the big things. So I think that's one thing that, kind of modernizing that homeownership message as a communicator so that folks understand how you can use your home. More people are working remotely, but thinking of platforms like Airbnb or just innovative ways, as Niles mentioned, to use that space to drive additional income and have a little bit more flexibility and actually a backup plan as, that extra income that we talk about often, kind of that side hustle vibe that Millennials and Gen Z folks talk about all the time. So I think it's just reframing how we talk about it, modernizing the message.
Would any of you be able to kind of talk about how do younger generations address maintenance and preservation so they can keep that generational wealth for those to come?
We take a lot of best practices and do things like we actually, have them open up put a certain amount of mortgage into escrow, create a deferred maintenance account, like things of that nature that are part of the process to make sure that this is a sustainable way to own the home.
I think a number of individuals have not necessarily received education in their homes about how to manage finances. We have worked really hard through our housing counseling programs to ensure that financial education is a core aspect of what happens during that home ownership journey.
One of the things, the messages that resonate a lot that we've been crafting with some of our folks is this notion of and I think this is true, maybe Jung, there's some data around this, but we hear a lot about meaning over material and lifestyles over listings. Mm-hmm. And so tying it to those very kind of, intangible things that especially a younger generation really is associating with is very helpful.
Kristen Messerly released a report for 2023 on next-gen homebuyers, and she said something along those lines. She found that 56% of next-gen, being Millennials and Gen Z, said that the reason why they're not buying is because they lack that financial support and advice that you've talked about. And that lack of knowledge is one of the top reasons why the next generation isn't buying housing. But what we haven't really talked about is not just the message of what those are, but how and through what are we messaging and who is providing that message. Because we know a lot of the younger generations especially minorities, have a lot of fear in that trusted institutions, or in the institutions that they don't trust, whether that's baggage from 2008 or maybe just having family members who've lost their home or foreclosed. So how can we not only change that message, but how do we pivot to make sure that they're receiving it from the right messengers?
We know that I think it's like 60% of women got had any kind of financial conversation growing up, whereas I think it's like 75% of millennial men. So it's even worse among women and even worse among people of color in terms of being knowledgeable and therefore being intimidated by the idea of embarking on the homeownership journey. So I think it's so important to have conversations that make this discussion relatable. So I think it's thinking about what's in it for them and and delivering a message in plain language, right? But I also think it's about, pushing the envelope on where we show up and have these conversations. So we need to, make sure we're studying and understanding where they are and meet them where they are. My takeaway is that I need to show up in any room with a variety of audiences and talk about it and make it relatable, make it attainable. And also, from the Airbnb perspective, also help people think about what the benefits might be in homeownership. It's not tying you down necessarily, right? It might unlock a new set of opportunities in terms of wealth building and stability that you might want to seriously consider. So I think just having that really real conversation with younger adults might be really important.
Yeah, our two biggest customer groups are professionals of color and also unmarried women in their 30s and 40s who want financial freedom. And so, whether it's Google's Black Network or Procter & Gamble's Black Network or the Latino networks, we're just, I think, coming at it from a kind of a group's perspective. Where are people? Where are they at? Where are they congregating? Where is the messaging coming from? And then obviously everyone knows the storytelling.
How do we expand that message, and what are the channels we can reach these younger generations on?
Including younger adults who might get it, right, or have a particular interest, and making sure they understand what the message is and understand what the experience they're having, and then empower them to go out and talk with their friends.
During the house party, we had a former DACA recipient talk about her journey to becoming a homeowner. We had a recent college graduate who had completed a housing counseling program. We had an individual who had been the beneficiary of public housing and subsidized housing talk about her journey toward becoming a homeowner. So having those validators share their story also helps to shift the narrative.
But what are they? What are the opportunities to overcome these barriers? And particularly for minorities who have additional barriers to get into homeownership. So what are those opportunities, and how do we convey them to each segment of the population?
So there's a lot of things going on in terms of student loan debt, but then I think Ruth briefly pointed out there's different ways of paying back your student loan debt, and one way you can do it is using the income-based repayment program, which actually significantly lowers the debt to income ratio, which a lot of the younger generations don't know about, as they don't know about the fact that you only need less than 5% of down payment when they're accessing homeownership. I think another thing that's happening right now, which is very interesting, is including rental payment history into credit. And we know that a lot of younger adults, especially younger adults of color, there are a greater share of those who do not have a credit scores, or they have a lower credit scores, which is another barrier of entering into homeownership, especially in this tight credit market.
Ruth, I know HUD's been working on a lot of ways to tackle the student loan issue. I wanted to just hear a little bit about some of your behavioral strategies of having people change what they know about student loan debt, because we know it's a barrier, but there's opportunities.
So we have to change what people know and then change how they feel about what they know before we can actually change their behavior. I offer that to you because whether it's a house party, a social media campaign, whatever it is you choose to do as communicators, you can't change the behavior until you change knowledge and attitudes. So once you do those two things, change. And that's what we were hoping to do through the house party. And interestingly, we've seen an uptick in the number of individuals who are going to our housing counseling site to locate a housing counseling agency in their community. We've seen an uptick in the number of individuals who are going to the FHA site to learn about the products we have available to help individuals become homeowners.
If I, a millennial, came to you specifically and said, I have barriers and challenges to get into homeownership, but I want to do it, what would you say to me?
Well, first I would say you can. You can. You just have to do your homework, right? Do your homework. The resources are out there.
Yeah, and I would say there are non-traditional paths, but they're paths that build community and build wealth.
Do you know about HUD? And the work that it does? You should visit HUD.gov to learn about all of the wonderful resources that are available to assist you in your journey to becoming a homeowner.
I would just let's just have a conversation, and we really want to learn more about what you think about homeownership and learn about what you want.
Appreciate all of you attending in person and online. Thank you to our fantastic panelists and all their wonderful insights they shared with us.
Thank you for listening to this edition of Beyond Four Walls. You can visit the National Housing Conference at nhc.org. There you can learn more about affordable housing policies, affordability challenges throughout the nation on our Paycheck to Paycheck database, and explore membership in NHC for you or your organization. We appreciate your interest and look forward to working with you in the future. Until next time, I'm David Dworkin, NHC's President and CEO, wishing you a great day.